When Naya Patterson, a homeless black girl, emerged from the Blue Ridge Forest holding the lost son of a Hells Angels leader, the bikers froze. Mud covered her face. Exhaustion weighed her body. But in her arms, Caleb Harper was safe. Samuel Harper, the father who'd searched for hours in desperation, saw his son alive, and the girl who had nothing, who gave everything. She tried to disappear back into the shadows. She always did. But this time, Samuel's voice stopped her. Wait. He didn't know that saving his son was the easy part. What came next would test everything he believed about loyalty, family, and the girl no one had ever fought for. The forest had been alive with sound just minutes before. Boots crunching through wet leaves. Voices calling Caleb's name. The distant rumble of motorcycle engines idling on the dirt road. Now, in the clearing where the search party had gathered, there was only silence. The kind of silence that comes when something impossible happens. Nia stood at the edge of the firelight, her thin jacket soaked through, her sneakers caked in mud. She held the boy against her chest, his small arms wrapped around her neck, his breath shallow but steady. Caleb's flashlight, nearly dead, dangled from her wrist by a frayed cord. She didn't look at the men surrounding her. She kept her eyes down, the way she'd learned to do when people stared too long. Samuel Harper pushed through the circle of bikers, his leather jacket streaked with dirt, his face pale beneath the stubble. When he saw his son, something cracked open inside him. Relief hit him like a fist to the chest. He stumbled forward, reaching for Caleb with trembling hands. "Caleb!" His voice broke. The boy lifted his head, tears streaking through the mud on his cheeks. "Dad." Samuel pulled him from Nia's arms and held him so tight the boy gasped. He buried his face in Caleb's hair, his shoulders shaking. Behind him, the bikers exchanged glances, some relieved, some confused, all watching the girl who'd brought him back. Logan Merritt, one of Samuel's closest brothers, stepped closer. He was a broad man with graying temples and a scar across his knuckles from a fight he'd won years ago. He studied Nia with sharp eyes, not suspicious, but careful. She was young, maybe 17 or 18, with braids pulled back into a loose ponytail and hollowed cheeks that spoke of too many missed meals. "Where'd you find him?" Logan asked, his voice low but not unkind. Nia's gaze flicked up for just a second before dropping again. "Near the creek about a mile north." Her voice was quiet, hoarse from the cold. "He was calling for help." Samuel looked up, still holding Caleb against him. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw with emotion. "You heard him. We've been searching for 3 hours. How did you—" "I was already out there," Nia said quickly, too quickly. She took a step back, her body language screaming that she wanted to leave. "He's safe now. That's all that matters." But Samuel didn't let her go. "Not yet." He stood slowly, keeping one hand on Caleb's shoulder, and faced her fully. For the first time, he really looked at her. The exhaustion etched into her face, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame, the faint tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with fear. "You've been out here alone?" he asked, softer now. Nia didn't answer. She shifted her weight, glancing toward the tree line, like she was calculating how fast she could disappear. Caleb turned in his father's arms, his small hand reaching out toward Nia. "She kept me warm, Dad. She sang to me." Samuel's throat tightened. His late wife used to sing to Caleb when he couldn't sleep, lullabies in Spanish, soft and familiar. He hadn't heard anyone sing to his son in 2 years. "What's your name?" Samuel asked, his voice steady now, grounding. "Nia. Nia." He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. "Thank you." You saved my son's life. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. I should go. Wait. Samuel's voice wasn't commanding. It was a plea. Stay. Just tell me how you knew where to look. Nia hesitated. Around her, the bikers stood like sentinels, their faces shadowed by firelight. She wasn't afraid of them. Not exactly. She'd seen worse on the streets, but kindness, genuine kindness, was harder to trust than cruelty. I didn't know, she said finally. I heard him crying. I followed the sound. Logan crouched down beside Caleb, checking him over with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. The boy was shivering, his lips tinged blue, but otherwise unharmed. Logan glanced at Nia, then back at Samuel. She got to him before hypothermia set in. Logan said quietly, Another hour out here, and we'd be having a different conversation. Samuel's jaw tightened. He looked at Nia again, this time seeing past the mud and exhaustion to something deeper. A girl who'd been invisible for so long she didn't know how to be seen. You said you were already out here, Samuel said. Why? Nia's defenses went back up. Does it matter? Yeah, Samuel said. It does. She didn't answer. Instead, she took another step back, ready to vanish into the dark. But Caleb reached for her again, his small voice cutting through the tension. Don't go. Nia froze. She looked at the boy, her expression softening for just a moment, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. Samuel saw it. He saw the way she looked at his son like she understood something about being alone and scared that no one else in that clearing could. Come back to camp with us, Samuel said. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't an order either. You need to warm up, get some food. We owe you that much. Nia shook her head. I don't need... Please. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. And for the first time in years, Nia didn't run. Later, they were back at the temporary camp. The search party had set up on the edge of the forest. Tarps stretched between trees, a fire crackling in a metal drum. Motorcycles lined up like soldiers along the dirt road. Dr. Melissa Harden, a volunteer physician who'd been helping with the search, wrapped Caleb in a wool blanket and checked his vitals while Samuel hovered close. Nia sat on the edge of a log, as far from the group as she could get without leaving entirely. Someone, Logan probably, had handed her a thermos of hot coffee. She wrapped her hands around it, but didn't drink. Samuel watched her from across the fire. She looked like she might bolt at any second. Logan sat down beside him, his voice low. She's been living out here. I know. You going to ask her why? Samuel's gaze didn't leave Nia. Not yet. Across the camp, Caleb looked up from where Dr. Harden was examining him. His eyes found Nia's, and he smiled. A small, tired smile that said more than words ever could. Nia didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. Samuel exhaled slowly, the weight of the night finally settling on his shoulders. His son was safe. That was all that mattered. But as he watched the girl who'd saved him, the girl who had nothing, who expected nothing, he realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She'd walked into his life carrying his son out of the dark, and he had no idea what shadows she'd been running from. Before we continue, from which city and country are you watching this? Stories like this travel farther than we imagine. Nia didn't sleep that night. She sat by the dying fire long after most of the bikers had gone home, their engines fading into the November dark. A few remained. Samuel, Logan, Dr. Harden, and two others whose names she hadn't caught. They spoke in low voices near the medical tent, where Caleb slept, wrapped in blankets that probably cost more than everything Naya owned. She could leave. She knew that no one was watching her anymore. The forest was right there, familiar and forgiving in its emptiness. She could slip away before dawn, before anyone asked questions she didn't want to answer. But she didn't move. Her hands were still wrapped around the thermos Logan had given her, the coffee long cold. She stared into the embers, her mind replaying the moment Caleb had reached for her. "Don't go." 2 words, a child's plea. It shouldn't have mattered. She'd learned a long time ago that staying anywhere too long only led to disappointment. And yet, you should get some rest. Nia looked up sharply. Dr. Melissa Hardin stood a few feet away, her medical bag slung over one shoulder. She was a woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that came from years of working in emergency rooms. She'd been the one to check Caleb over, asking him gentle questions while Samuel hovered like a storm about to break. "I'm fine," Nia said automatically. Dr. Hardin tilted her head, studying her the way doctors do when they see something others miss. "When's the last time you ate?" Nia's jaw tightened. "I said I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dr. Hardin sat down on the log beside her, setting her bag between them. She didn't push. She just waited. Nia hated that. The waiting, the patience. It made her want to run faster. "Yesterday," Nia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I ate yesterday." "What did you have?" "Half a sandwich someone left on a bench." Dr. Hardin didn't react. No pity, no judgment. She just nodded like Nia had told her the weather. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a protein bar and a bottle of water. She set them on the log between them. "It's not much," Dr. Hardin said, "but it's something." Nia stared at the food, her stomach twisted with hunger and something else, something harder to name. Shame, maybe, or exhaustion. She'd spent so long being invisible that kindness felt like a spotlight she couldn't escape. "Why are you being nice to me?" Nia asked. Dr. Hardin smiled, small and sad. "Because someone should be." By the time the sun rose, Nia had eaten the protein bar and half the water. She'd also learned 3 things. 1. Caleb Harper was 8 years old and had wandered away from a family camping trip near Pisgah National Forest. His father had organized a search party within the hour, pulling in every favor he had with the local Hells Angels chapter. 2. Samuel Harper wasn't just any biker. He was the chapter president, a man people respected, feared, and followed without question. Losing Caleb wasn't just a father's nightmare. It was a failure he'd carry for the rest of his life. 3. The bikers had been searching for nearly 4 hours before Nia found Caleb. Dozens of trained men with flashlights, walkie-talkies, and experience navigating those woods. And somehow, a homeless girl with nothing but instinct had done what they couldn't. Logan told her all this while pouring fresh coffee into her thermos. He didn't ask why she'd been in the forest. He didn't ask where she came from, or where she planned to go. He just talked, filling the silence with facts that kept her from feeling like she had to explain herself. "Samuel's a good man," Logan said, leaning against a tree. "Fair, protective. He'd burn the world down for his kid." Nia glanced toward the tent where Samuel sat beside Caleb's sleeping form, one hand resting on his son's shoulder like he was afraid to let go. "He doesn't know me," Nia said quietly. "No," Logan agreed. "But you saved his son. That means something to him. It means something to all of us." Nia didn't know what to say to that. Gratitude was a currency she didn't understand. People didn't thank her. They looked past her, through her, around her. She was a ghost in her own life. "I should go," she said, standing abruptly. Logan didn't try to stop her. He just watched her with those sharp, patient eyes. "You can, but where are you going?" Naya didn't answer because the truth was, she didn't know. She never did. She made it halfway to the tree line before Caleb's voice stopped her. "Nia." She turned. The boy was awake, stumbling out of the tent with Samuel right behind him. Caleb's face lit up when he saw her, and he broke into a run, his blanket trailing behind him like a cape. He crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Nia froze, her hands hovering awkwardly above his shoulders. She didn't know how to hold him back. She didn't know if she was allowed to. "You're still here," Caleb said, his voice muffled against her jacket. Naya's throat tightened. "I was just leaving." "No." Caleb pulled back, looking up at her with wide, desperate eyes. "You can't. You have to stay." Samuel approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He crouched down beside his son, one hand on Caleb's back. "Caleb, she's got her own life. We can't." "But she doesn't," Caleb interrupted, his voice trembling. "She was alone out there, Dad, just like me." Samuel's gaze shifted to Nia, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that scared her more than anger or suspicion. She saw understanding. "Is that true?" Samuel asked quietly. Nia wanted to lie. She wanted to tell him she had somewhere to be, someone waiting for her, a life that didn't involve sleeping under bridges and scavenging for food. But the words wouldn't come, so she just nodded. Samuel stood, his jaw working like he was chewing on something hard to swallow. He looked at Logan, who'd walked over to join them. They exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations that only people who'd known each other for years could have. Then Samuel looked back at Nia. "Where were you planning to go?" Nia shrugged, trying to keep her voice steady. "Wherever." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Samuel exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights and too many hard decisions. But when he spoke, his voice was firm. "You can't just disappear," he said. "Not after what you did." Nia bristled. "I didn't do it for—" "I know." Samuel cut her off. "You didn't do it for thanks or a reward. You did it because it was the right thing to do. But that doesn't change the fact that you're out here alone with nothing. And I can't—" He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "I can't just let you walk back into that." Nia's heart pounded. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," Samuel said. "But I'd like to help anyway." "I don't need help. Everyone needs help." Caleb tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, please. She saved me. Can't we save her back?" Samuel looked down at his son, and something in his expression softened. Then he looked at Nia again, and she saw it. The decision already made, the line already crossed. "Come back to town with us," Samuel said. "Just for a few days. Get a hot meal, a real bed. Figure out what you need." Nia shook her head. "I can't." "You can," Logan said, stepping forward. "And you should." Dr. Hardin appeared beside them, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "You're exhausted, malnourished, and probably dehydrated. If you go back out there like this, you won't last the week." Nia's defenses were crumbling piece by piece. She looked at the faces surrounding her. Samuel determined and hopeful. Caleb clutching her hand like she might vanish if he let go. Logan steady and patient. Dr. Hardin kind and unflinching. She'd spent so long being invisible that she didn't know how to be seen. But here in this moment, she was. "Okay," Nia whispered. "Just for a few days." Caleb's face broke into a smile so wide it hurt to look at. Samuel nodded once, relief flooding his features, and Nia realized with a strange twist in her chest that she'd just made the hardest decision of her life. She'd chosen to stay. That afternoon, they rode into Asheville. Nia had never been on a motorcycle before. Samuel gave her a spare helmet and told her to hold on tight. She climbed onto the back of his bike, her arms wrapped around his waist, and felt the engine roar to life beneath her. The world blurred past. Trees, mountains, sky. The wind tore at her jacket, cold and wild and free. For the first time in months, Nia felt something other than fear. She felt alive. Behind them, Logan and the others followed, their engines a thunder that echoed through the valley. They moved like a pack, unified and unbreakable. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Nia realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She was being carried. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that staying would cost more than any of them expected. Because the world outside the forest wasn't as forgiving as the people in it. Tell me, would you have done the same if you were in her place? The house Samuel brought her to wasn't what Nia expected. It was modest, a 2-story brick home on the outskirts of Asheville, with a wraparound porch and a tire swing hanging from an oak tree in the yard. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed biker gang, just a home where a man was raising his son alone. Inside, it was lived in and warm. Photos lined the walls, Caleb as a baby, a woman with dark hair, and Samuel's smile. Family gatherings with people Nia would never meet. The kitchen smelled like coffee and something else. Something Nia couldn't quite place until she realized it smelled like safety. Guest rooms upstairs, Samuel said, setting her worn backpack by the stairs. Bathrooms down the hall. Towels are in the closet. Nia stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. I can sleep on the couch. You can sleep in a bed, Samuel said firmly, like a person. The words hit harder than he probably meant them to. Nia swallowed and nodded, not trusting her voice. Caleb grabbed her hand, tugging her toward the stairs. Come on, I'll show you. The guest room was small but clean. A double bed with a quilt, a dresser, a window overlooking the backyard. Caleb bounced on the edge of the bed like it was the most exciting thing in the world. This is where Grandma used to stay when she visited, he said. But she doesn't come anymore. Nia sat down carefully, like the bed might disappear if she moved too fast. The mattress was soft, softer than anything she'd felt in 2 years. She ran her hand over the quilt, her chest tightening. You okay? Caleb asked, tilting his head. Nia forced a smile. Yeah, I'm good. But she wasn't. Because this kindness, this space, this home, wasn't hers. It couldn't be. People like her didn't get to stay in places like this. They borrowed time and left before anyone realized they didn't belong. The first 2 days were strange. Samuel went to work, something involving construction and logistics that Nia didn't fully understand. Caleb went to school, and Nia was left alone in a house that wasn't hers, surrounded by reminders of a life she'd never had. She cleaned. It was the only thing she knew how to do that felt useful. She washed dishes, folded laundry, swept the floors. When Samuel came home, he looked around surprised. You didn't have to do that, he said. I wanted to. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. That night, they ate dinner together, spaghetti and garlic bread that Samuel made from scratch, while Caleb told stories about his day at school. Nia sat at the table, quiet, watching them like she was observing something she wasn't part of. But Caleb kept pulling her in. Nia, guess what happened in gym class? Nia, do you like spaghetti? Nia, can you help me with my homework? And slowly, piece by piece, the walls she'd built started to crack. On the third day, the social workers came. Nia was folding laundry in the living room when she heard the knock. She froze, her hands gripping a t-shirt like it was a lifeline. Through the window, she saw a woman in a gray blazer with a clipboard and a man in a cheap suit standing on the porch. Her stomach dropped. Samuel opened the door, his expression guarded. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled, polite, professional, empty. "Mr. Harper, I'm Karen Dennison from Child and Family Services. This is Officer Ramirez. We'd like to speak with you about Nia Patterson." Nia's breath caught. She stepped back from the window, her pulse racing. Samuel's voice was calm but firm. "She's not in any trouble." "We're not saying she is," Karen said smoothly. "But we've received reports about a minor living with you without legal guardianship. We need to ensure her safety and well-being." "She's safe here." "I'm sure you believe that, Mr. Harper. But we have protocols." Nia's hands shook. She knew this dance. She'd done it before. Caseworkers asking questions. Forms that never led anywhere. Systems that shuffled people around like they were problems to be solved instead of human beings. She couldn't do it again. She turned and walked upstairs, moving quickly but quietly. In the guest room, she grabbed her backpack and started shoving clothes inside. Not hers, just things Samuel had let her borrow. Her hands fumbled with the zipper. Downstairs, she heard Samuel's voice rising. "She's been through enough. You're not taking her anywhere." "Mr. Harper, we're not taking her. We're ensuring she's placed in an appropriate environment." "This is an appropriate environment." "With all due respect, you're a single father with ties to a motorcycle club. The optics alone." "I don't care about optics. I care about that girl." Nia closed her eyes, her chest aching. He was fighting for her. A man she'd known for 3 days was standing between her and the system that had chewed her up and spit her out a dozen times before, but it wouldn't be enough. It never was. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and opened the window. The roof of the porch was just below. She could climb down, disappear into the streets before anyone noticed. It's what she always did. It's what she was good at. She had one leg out the window when she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Nia!" She froze. Caleb stood in the doorway, his eyes wide. "Where are you going?" His voice was small, scared. Nia's throat closed. "I have to leave." "Why?" "Because I don't belong here." "Yes, you do." "Caleb, you do." Tears welled in his eyes. "You saved me. You're supposed to stay. That's how it works." Nia shook her head, her own eyes burning. "That's not how the world works, kid." "Then the world is stupid." Despite everything, Nia almost smiled. She pulled her leg back inside and knelt down in front of him. "Your dad's a good man. But those people downstairs, they're not going to let me stay. They'll put me somewhere else, somewhere with rules and strangers. And then, we'll fight them." "You can't fight the system, Caleb. Dad can." Caleb grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Please don't go. Please." Nia looked at him, this boy who'd been lost and terrified in the woods, who'd held on to her like she was the only solid thing in the world. And she realized something. She was terrified too. Not of the social workers or the system, or even the uncertainty of what came next. She was terrified of hope, because hope meant believing things could be different. And every time she'd believed that before, she'd been proven wrong. Downstairs, the conversation had reached a breaking point. "Mr. Harper, if you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement." Samuel's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. Logan stood beside him, silent but imposing. Dr. Harden had arrived minutes earlier, her medical bag still in hand. "You want to talk about safety?" Samuel said, his voice low and dangerous. That girl was sleeping under a bridge 2 weeks ago. She was starving, alone. No one was looking for her. No one cared. And when my son needed help, when trained searchers couldn't find him, she did. So don't stand in my house and tell me she's not safe here. Karen Dennison's smile never wavered. I understand your gratitude, Mr. Harper, but gratitude doesn't constitute legal guardianship. Then I'll get legal guardianship. That's a lengthy process. I don't care how long it takes. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, his tone more sympathetic. Look, we're not the bad guys here. We're just trying to make sure she's okay. She is okay, Dr. Hardin interjected. I've been monitoring her health since the night she found Caleb. She's improving. She's eating. She's sleeping. She's safe. Karen turned to her, unimpressed. And you are? Dr. Melissa Hardin. I'm a licensed physician and a volunteer with all due respect, doctor. This is a matter for child services. Logan finally spoke, his voice quiet, but firm. You want to take her? Fine. But you're going to have to go through all of us first. Karen's expression hardened. Are you threatening a civil servant? I'm stating a fact. The tension in the room was suffocating. Samuel looked like he was 2 seconds away from doing something that would get him arrested. Logan's hands were loose at his sides. Ready, doctor. Hardin stood her ground, her eyes steady, and then Naya appeared at the top of the stairs, Caleb's hand in hers. Everyone turned to look at her. She was pale, trembling, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, but she was there. She hadn't run. I'll go, Nia said quietly. No. Caleb's voice cracked. Nia, Samuel started. It's fine, Naya interrupted, her voice hollow. I've done this before. It's easier if I just go. Karen nodded, satisfied. That's very mature of you. Nah. But Samuel wasn't done. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stood at the base of the stairs, looking up at her. His voice was steady, but there was something fierce in his eyes. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. No. Samuel shook his head. You don't, because I'm not letting them take you. You can't stop them. Watch me. Karen sighed, her patience wearing thin. Mr. Harper. Samuel didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Nia. You saved my son. You gave me my family back. And I'm telling you right now, you're not walking out that door unless you want to. Not because some bureaucrat with a clipboard says so. Nia's breath hitched. Why do you care? Because someone should. The same words Dr. Hardin had said days ago in the forest. And this time, Nia felt them crack something open inside her. She looked at Caleb, who was crying now, his small hand clutching hers like a lifeline. She looked at Logan, steady and loyal, at Dr. Hardin, who'd shown her kindness when she had no reason to, at Samuel, who was staring at her like she mattered. Then for the first time in her life, Nia made a choice, not to run, not to disappear, but to stay. I don't want to go, she whispered. Samuel's expression softened. He turned to Karen Dennison, his voice like steel. You heard her. Karen's mouth pressed into a thin line. This isn't over, Mr. Harper. Yeah, Samuel said. It is. Officer Ramirez touched Karen's arm. Let's go. We'll file our report and let the courts handle it. Karen shot one last look at Nia, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. The silence that followed was deafening, and then Caleb threw his arms around Nia, sobbing into her jacket. Samuel stood at the bottom of the stairs, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Logan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Dr. Hardin was the first to speak. They'll be back. I know, Samuel said. And next time they'll bring lawyers. Let them. Naya looked at him, her voice breaking. You don't have to do this. Samuel met her eyes, and his voice was firm. Yes, I do. That night, Nia didn't pack her bag. She didn't climb out the window or slip away in the dark. She stayed. But as she lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, one thought echoed in her mind. What if they take me anyway? If you believe no one should face fear alone, like this video, and tell us, what would you have done? The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. 2 weeks of uncertainty. 2 weeks of Nia waking up every morning wondering if today would be the day they came to take her away. 2 weeks of Samuel making phone calls to lawyers, filling out forms, gathering documents that proved he could provide a stable home. 2 weeks of learning what it felt like to have people fight for you. Samuel hired an attorney, a woman named Claire Westfield, who specialized in foster care and guardianship cases. She was sharp, experienced, and honest in a way that made Nia trust her immediately. This won't be easy, Claire said during their first meeting, sitting across from Samuel and Nia in her downtown office. The state has concerns. Your ties to the Hells Angels, the fact that you're a single father, Nia's history as a runaway. All of it works against us. But she saved my son, Samuel said, his voice tight. I know, and that matters. But the court doesn't care about heroism. They care about stability, resources, and whether you can provide long-term care. Claire turned to Nia. They'll ask you questions, hard ones, about where you've been, why you left, what you want. Nia's hands were clenched in her lap. What if I say the wrong thing? There's no wrong thing, Claire said gently, just the truth. But Nia had spent so long hiding the truth that she didn't know if she could speak it out loud. The days blurred together. Samuel took time off work to be home. Logan stopped by almost every evening, bringing food or just sitting on the porch with Samuel, talking in low voices. Dr. Harden checked in regularly, monitoring Nia's health and offering quiet reassurance. And Caleb refused to leave her side. He did his homework at the kitchen table while she cleaned. He asked her to help him with math problems she barely understood. He told her stories about his mother, a woman named Elena, who died when he was 6. She used to sing, Caleb said one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the guest room floor while Nia folded laundry. Dad says I got her voice. Do you sing? Nia asked. Caleb shrugged. Sometimes when I'm scared. What do you sing? Whatever she used to sing to me. He paused, then looked up at her. What did you sing to me in the forest? Nia froze, a shirt halfway folded in her hands. She hadn't thought about it. It had just come out, something her own mother used to hum when Nia was little, before everything fell apart. I don't remember, she lied. Caleb tilted his head, studying her the way kids do when they know you're not telling the truth. But he didn't push. He just went back to his coloring book, humming softly to himself, and Nia realized with a sharp ache in her chest that she was terrified of losing this. The night before the hearing, Nia couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the backyard. The tire swing swayed gently in the breeze. The moon hung low and full, casting silver light over everything. She thought about running one last time, just disappear into the night. Save everyone the trouble of fighting for someone who'd probably just mess it up anyway. But then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Samuel appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. Figured you'd be awake. Nia nodded, but didn't speak. He handed her a mug and sat down in the chair by the window. For a while, neither of them said anything. They just sat in the quiet, drinking tea that was too hot and tasted faintly of honey. I talked to Elena the night before she died, Samuel said suddenly. His voice was soft, distant. We'd just put Caleb to bed. She was sick. Had been for months. We both knew it was coming, but we didn't talk about it. We just sat like this. Nia looked at him. His face was shadowed, but she could see the grief etched into every line. She made me promise something, Samuel continued. She said, if you ever get the chance to help someone the way people helped us, don't hesitate. Don't think. Just do it. He looked at Nia, his eyes steady. I didn't understand what she meant until I saw you in that forest. Nia's throat tightened. I'm not worth all this. Yes, you are. You don't know me. I know enough. You don't know what I've done, where I've been. I don't care. Samuel's voice was firm, unwavering. You're here now. That's what matters. Nia shook her head, tears burning her eyes. What if they take me anyway? What if all of this, everything you're doing, doesn't matter? Samuel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Then we'll figure it out. But I'm not giving up on you, Nia. Not now. Not ever. Something inside her broke. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob building in her chest. But it came anyway, raw and painful and desperate. Samuel didn't move. He just sat there, letting her cry, letting her fall apart in a way she'd never allowed herself to before. And when she finally stopped, when the tears dried and her breathing evened out, he spoke again. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly, you're not alone anymore. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Nia sat between Samuel and Claire, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Karen Dennison sat with a state-appointed attorney, their expressions neutral and professional. The judge was an older woman with graying hair and sharp eyes. She reviewed the case file in silence, flipping through pages while everyone waited. Finally, she looked up. Miss Patterson, I'd like to hear from you directly. Can you tell me in your own words why you want to stay with Mr. Harper? Nia's mouth went dry. She glanced at Samuel, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She stood, her legs shaking. Because... Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. Because, for the first time in my life, someone's fighting for me. Not because they have to, not because it's their job, but because they want to. And you believe Mr. Harper can provide a stable home. I know he can. I've seen it. I've lived it. The judge's expression didn't change. Ms. Dennison, you've raised concerns about Mr. Harper's affiliation with the Hells Angels. Can you elaborate? Karen stood, her voice measured. Your Honor, while Mr. Harper has no criminal record, his association with a known motorcycle club raises questions about the environment Miss Patterson would be exposed to. Claire stood immediately. Your Honor, the Hells Angels operate as a legitimate motorcycle club in this region. Mr. Harper is a respected member of the community, a business owner, and a devoted father. To suggest otherwise is... I'm not suggesting anything, Miss Westfield. I'm stating facts. Facts without context are prejudice. The judge raised a hand. Enough. Mr. Harper, I'd like to hear from you. Samuel stood, his posture straight, his voice calm. Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I'm perfect. I've made mistakes. I've lived a life that doesn't fit into neat boxes. But I'm also a father who would do anything to protect my son. And when Nia saved him, when she gave me back the thing I love most in this world, I realized something. He paused, his gaze shifting to Nia. She needed saving too. And if I can give her the kind of home I've tried to give Caleb, a place where she's safe, valued, and loved, then I'm going to do it, because that's what family does. The judge studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Nia. "Ms. Patterson, do you feel safe with Mr. Harper?" "Yes." "Do you want to stay?" Nia's voice was steady now. "More than anything." The judge leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against the desk. The silence stretched, agonizing and endless. Then she spoke. "Miss Dennison, I appreciate your concerns, but I've reviewed this case thoroughly. Mr. Harper has provided evidence of financial stability, a safe living environment, and character references from multiple sources, including a licensed physician and several community leaders." She looked at Samuel. "I'm granting temporary guardianship to Mr. Harper, effective immediately. We'll revisit this in 6 months to assess long-term arrangements." Nia's breath left her in a rush. Beside her, Samuel's shoulders sagged with relief. Karen Dennison stood. "Your Honor, I must object." "Your objection is noted, Miss Dennison, but my decision stands." The judge's gaze softened as she looked at Nia. "Miss Patterson, you've been through more than most people experience in a lifetime. I hope you find the peace and stability you deserve." Nia nodded, unable to speak. The judge struck her gavel. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the November air was crisp and clean. Logan was waiting on the steps along with Dr. Hardin and a handful of other bikers who'd shown up to support Samuel. When they saw the look on his face, they knew. Logan clapped Samuel on the shoulder, grinning. "Told you." Dr. Hardin hugged Nia, her voice warm. "Welcome home, sweetheart." But it was Caleb who nearly knocked Nia over, sprinting across the plaza and throwing his arms around her waist. "You're staying!" he shouted, his voice muffled against her jacket. "You're really staying?" Nia wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'm staying." Samuel stood a few feet away, watching them, and for the first time in 2 years since Elena died, he felt something loosen in his chest. Hope. That evening, back at the house, Samuel pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was small, wrapped in tissue paper. He handed it to Nia without a word. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, delicate, with a small charm in the shape of a wing. "It was Elena's," Samuel said quietly. "Caleb was holding it the night he got lost. We found it later near where you found him." Nia stared at the bracelet, her hands trembling. "She would have liked you," Samuel continued, "and she would have wanted you to have it." Nia looked up at him, her eyes swimming with tears. "I can't." "You can." Samuel's voice was firm. "You brought my son back to me, Nia. This belongs to you now." She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It was a perfect fit, and for the first time in her life, Nia felt like she belonged to something bigger than survival. She belonged to a family. But outside, the world kept turning, and somewhere in the distance, the road stretched on, long, winding, and full of possibility. Winter had softened into early spring, and the Blue Ridge Mountains were coming alive again. The trees, that had been bare and skeletal in November, now wore crowns of fresh green. Wildflowers dotted the forest floor, and the air smelled like rain and new beginnings. Nia stood on the edge of the same clearing where everything had changed. She wasn't alone this time. Behind her, a dozen motorcycles lined the dirt road, their engines cooling after the ride up from Asheville. Samuel leaned against his bike, arms crossed, watching her with quiet understanding. Logan stood beside him, smoking a cigarette and talking in low tones with Dr. Hardin, who joined them for the ride. Caleb sat on the back of Samuel's bike, swinging his legs and humming the song Nia had sung to him that night in the forest. But it was what Nia wore that made everything different. The leather vest, it wasn't new. Samuel had given her one that had belonged to Elena, adjusted to fit Nia's smaller frame. The patches were worn but proud. the Hells Angels insignia on the back, smaller patches marking rides and events Nia was only beginning to understand. It felt heavy on her shoulders, but not in a bad way. It felt like armor, like belonging. She touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one with the wing charm, and let her fingers trace the shape. She wore it every day now. It had become part of her, a reminder that she wasn't invisible anymore. "You okay?" Samuel's voice broke through her thoughts. Nia turned. He'd walked up beside her, hands in his pockets, his expression gentle. "Yeah," she said, and she meant it. Samuel nodded toward the forest. "You want to go in?" Nia looked at the trees, at the path that had once been her only refuge, the place where she'd hidden from the world, where she'd survived on instinct and fear, the place where she'd found Caleb, and in doing so, found herself. "Not yet," she said. "I just want to stand here for a minute." Samuel didn't push. He just stood beside her, solid and steady, the way he'd been since the beginning. The past months had been a blur of firsts. First time sleeping in the same bed for more than a week. First time celebrating a holiday. Christmas had been overwhelming in the best way, with Caleb dragging her downstairs at dawn to open presents she hadn't expected. First time riding with the club, not as a passenger, but as part of the pack, her borrowed bike roaring beneath her as they carved through mountain roads. First time believing she deserved it. It hadn't been easy. There were nights when the old fear crept back in, when she woke up convinced this was temporary, that someone would come and take it all away. But every time that fear surfaced, Samuel or Caleb or Logan or Dr. Hardin was there to remind her, "You're not going anywhere." The 6-month review hearing was still months away, but Claire Westfield had assured them it was just a formality. The state had no grounds to remove her, not with the stability Samuel had provided, the community support, the clear evidence that Nia was thriving. She'd even started school again, her first time in a classroom in nearly 3 years. It was strange, sitting at a desk and pretending to care about algebra and history when she'd spent so long just trying to survive. But Caleb helped her with homework, and Samuel never pushed too hard. He just reminded her gently that she had time, that she didn't have to figure everything out at once. And slowly, day by day, Nia started to believe him. "Hey, Nia." She turned. Caleb was jogging toward her, his sneakers kicking up dust. He'd grown in the past months, taller, louder, more confident. He still had nightmares sometimes, still woke up calling for his dad. But he was healing. They both were. "What's up, kid?" Nia asked. Caleb stopped in front of her, slightly out of breath. "Dad says we're doing a bonfire tonight. You going to help me gather wood?" Nia smiled. "Yeah, I'll help." Caleb grinned and grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the tree line. Samuel watched them go, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Logan walked up beside him, flicking ash from his cigarette. "She's doing good?" "She is," Samuel agreed. "You know, when you first brought her home, I thought you were crazy." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Logan chuckled. "Now I think you might be the smartest guy I know." That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, they lit the bonfire. The flames crackled and danced, sending sparks spiraling into the twilight. The bikers gathered around, passing beers and telling stories, some true, some exaggerated, all loud and full of life. Caleb roasted marshmallows, his face sticky with sugar, while Nia sat on a log beside Samuel, soaking in the warmth. Dr. Hardin sat across from them, her expression content. "This is nice," she said. "Peaceful?" "Yeah," Nia said softly. "It is." Logan raised his beer. "A toast to Nia, newest member of the family." The others echoed him, raising their drinks. To Nia. Naya's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. She raised her own bottle, root beer, because she wasn't old enough for the real thing yet, and smiled. To family, she said. They drank, and the fire roared higher, and for a moment everything felt exactly as it should. Later, when the fire had burned down to embers, and most of the bikers had headed home, Nia stood at the edge of the clearing again. The stars were out now, brilliant and endless against the black sky. The forest hummed with night sounds. Crickets, distant owls, the rustle of wind through leaves. Samuel walked up beside her, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He handed her one without a word. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks and watching the stars. You ever think about that night? Samuel asked quietly. The night you found him? Nia nodded. All the time. You ever regret it? She looked at him, surprised. No, never. Samuel smiled, small and sad and proud all at once. Good. Nia turned back to the forest, her voice barely above a whisper. I was so scared that night. I thought I was going to die out here alone. Forgotten. She paused, her fingers tightening around the mug. And then I heard him crying, and I thought, maybe I could do one good thing before I disappeared. You did more than one good thing, Samuel said. You gave my son his life back. You gave me hope. And whether you realize it or not, you gave yourself a future. Nia's eyes burned with tears, but she blinked them back. She touched the bracelet on her wrist, the little silver wing catching the starlight. Sometimes, she said softly, saving someone saves you back. Samuel didn't respond. He didn't need to. They stood there together, father and daughter, in all the ways that mattered, watching the forest that had once been Nia's prison become her sanctuary. Behind them, Caleb's voice called out from the dying fire. Nia, come on. I want to show you something. Nia smiled. She drained the last of her hot chocolate and handed the mug to Samuel. I'll be right back. Samuel watched her jog toward his son, her laughter echoing through the clearing. And for the first time since Elena died, Samuel felt whole again. The road stretched on, long and winding and full of promise. But Nia Patterson was no longer running. She was home, in the shadowed depths of the Blue Ridge Forest. A homeless girl named Nia Patterson carried a trembling boy named Caleb out of the darkness, not for reward or recognition, but because his cries pierced the silence of her own loneliness. She had nothing, no home, no family, no hope. Yet in that moment of selfless courage, she gave everything. What began as a desperate act of kindness blossomed into something profound. A fractured father, Samuel, seeing his son's savior and refusing to let her vanish back into the void. Through storms of doubt, bureaucratic battles, and the raw terror of vulnerability, Nia learned that family isn't born from blood, but forged in the fires of unwavering loyalty and chosen love. The bikers, once strangers, became her shield. A grieving widower became her father. A lost child became her brother. This story whispers a timeless truth. Sometimes, saving someone else is the spark that reignites your own soul. In a world quick to overlook the invisible, it reminds us that one act of compassion can rewrite destinies, turning survivors into saviors and solitude into unbreakable bonds. True belonging isn't about where you come from. It's about who fights to keep you. Let Nia's journey touch your heart and challenge you. Have you ever extended a hand that changed everything? What about you? Share in the comments below. What's one act of kindness that saved you or someone you know? Hit that like button if this moved you. Subscribe for more stories of hope and redemption, and join our family. You never know whose life you'll inspire next.